23-year-old Emma Lee was running her South Seattle drive-through coffee shop, A Taste of Heaven Espresso, in June of 2024 when she got into an argument with an unruly customer over a $22 coffee. The disagreement steadily escalated for roughly 10 minutes, despite the efforts of onlookers to calm the situation down. Lee later told Fox 13 that the man was a repeat customer who had complained in the past about the price of his order. She told him that nobody was forcing him to come to her cafe and that the prices were clearly listed on the menu, but the man reportedly continued to act like he had been deceived or scammed. As the altercation became more heated, the man exited his car and tried prying Lee's drive-through window open. At one point he said, "Nobody's going to miss you," causing Lee to feel threatened. He proceeded to throw his drink at the young business owner, prompting Lee to smash his windshield with a hammer. When the angry customer still refused to leave, Lee called the police, who determined that she had acted in self-defense and chose not to arrest her while the customer was booked on a misdemeanor assault charge. Number 17. Instant karma for Mercedes driver. In 2016, a YouTuber named Marcus Xavier posted a dash cam clip of a driver laying on the horn at a Mercedes-Benz that stopped in front of their vehicle at a yield sign. The driver of the Mercedes started to go, then slammed on the brakes, exited his car and gave the driver behind him the middle finger. As he was getting back into his vehicle, he accidentally slammed the door on his head as the car charged forward, giving the driver behind him a good laugh before he angrily sped off. Number 16. Angry biker gets what he asks for. In a video that went viral in June of 2014, a man on a motorcycle rode up to a moving silver-colored sedan in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and kicked it in a fit of road rage. As one would probably expect, it caused the enraged motorist to lose control of his bike, and he fell off the motorcycle as it toppled to the ground. The biker hit his head but was thankfully wearing a helmet and could be seen sliding down the road for a short distance along with the motorcycle before they stopped on the pavement. The clip was uploaded to YouTube by a man named Antonio Borba, who said that the silver car had drifted into the right-hand lane along the Ayrton Senna highway, causing the biker to throw a tantrum in the middle of traffic. Knowing that the situation was most likely about to escalate, Borba took out his phone and began recording. He mentioned that the police got involved, but he didn't stick around to see how the ordeal played out. One can only hope that the biker learned a lesson or two about road safety and the dangers associated with road rage. Number 15. Troublesome teens cause an accident while fleeing the scene. In June of 2024, the home of a young Detroit woman named Nisha Anderson was targeted in a messy act of vandalism by a group of teens. The culprits, which included Anderson's brother's ex-girlfriend, coated her residence with a combination of eggs, flour, water, and Jiffy pancake mix. Speaking with Fox 2 Detroit, Anderson explained that her brother's ex-girlfriend was supposedly upset because he had broken up with her. After splattering the house with the soupy mix, the suspects fled in an SUV. But they didn't get very far because they blew a stop sign and crashed into another vehicle. The other driver suffered non-life-threatening injuries, and the teenagers attempted to flee the scene on foot, but once again, they didn't get very far. The police quickly caught up with them, and while no criminal charges were filed, the accused egg throwers were ticketed and sent home with their parents. Number 14. Rebi Roberson. 74-year-old Rebi Roberson was watching TV at her Bowie County, Texas home on New Year's Day in 2017 when a masked intruder entered the residence and pointed a gun at her. Without hesitation, the senior citizen grabbed her .38 caliber pistol off a nearby table and pointed it at the would-be robber, who took off running as soon as he realized that the tables had turned. Roberson chased after the man while firing multiple shots in his direction, leaving her wall riddled with bullet holes. It's unclear whether the intruder was shot, but he fled the scene and managed to evade capture. During an interview with local station KSLA, Roberson openly admitted that she tried to kill the suspect when she opened fire, and she said she would react the same way in the event of another home invasion. And this was perfectly fine with law enforcement, because in the state of Texas, people have a right to defend themselves, their family, and their property with lethal force. Number 13. Martin Gonzalez Garcia and Ashiales Roldan Ocasio, while responding to a 911 hang-up call at a residence in Kissimmee, Florida, one day in December of 2022, Polk County deputies encountered 23-year-old Martin Gonzalez Garcia and 22-year-old Ashiales Roldan Ocasio, who were wanted in connection with the theft of $140 worth of merchandise from a Dollar General store earlier that day. Roldan Ocasio reportedly told law enforcement that she had dialed 911 to ask for help moving the couple's belongings out of the home where they had been squatting illegally. She also mentioned that she and Gonzalez Garcia planned to ask the police for a ride to the airport so they could fly to New York for the weekend, but the only place the cops were willing to take the pair was to the local jail, where they were booked into custody on suspicion of burglarizing a residence. Gonzalez Garcia admitted to stealing several pairs of headphones from Dollar General and was booked on additional burglary and theft charges. Number 12. Jeremy Mercier. In April of 2023, restaurant workers in Auburn, Maine, opened what they thought was a shipment of coffee mugs and discovered 31 pounds of the deadly drug, fentanyl. The employees called the police and officers stationed themselves outside the restaurant to see if anyone came by in search of the package, which held an estimated street value of $3 million. Roughly an hour after the drugs were delivered, a suspect, later identified by law enforcement as 41-year-old Jeremy Mercier, appeared in the restaurant's parking lot in an apparent attempt to retrieve the illicit goods. Mercier, who owns a motorcycle shop, has no connections with the restaurant, which would warrant having a package delivered there. Yet inside the parcel, police found a shipping label with his name on it. Prosecutors charged Mercier with 2 counts of aggravated drug trafficking and 1 count of aggravated importing of drugs. All of the charges are felonies and could each carry a prison sentence of up to 30 years in the event of a conviction. Mercier previously served prison time for a cocaine distribution charge dating back to 2007. At the time of his more recent arrest, he was out on bail for an unrelated misdemeanor case. Following his arrest, he posted $115,000 cash bail and was released pending the outcome of the case. While awaiting trial on his state charges in February 2024, Mercier was arrested on a federal charge of distribution of methamphetamine. The new charge came after a confidential source purchased 3 ounces of methamphetamine from Mercier while wearing a recording device. According to the most recent updates on the case, Mercier remains held in federal custody as his case works its way through the court system. Number 11. Artemio Sanchez Ortega. In late May of 2024, an Albuquerque man was seen calmly walking along a residential street with a red gas can in hand. He then jumped over the front gate of a residence and tried to set it on fire, but something went wrong and he ended up setting himself ablaze. Identified by police as 46-year-old Artemio Sanchez Ortega, the suspect was reportedly trying to burn down his ex-girlfriend's home. Surveillance footage showed the arsonist engulfed in flames as he climbed back over the gate and tripped over his own feet in his attempt to escape the blaze. He then fled the scene on foot while still on fire. Sanchez Ortega fled the scene in a pickup truck and is still on the run according to the most recent available updates on the case. According to police, the suspect's ex-girlfriend told officers that Sanchez Ortega called her 3 times before he tried to burn her house down. Thankfully, the fire only caused significant damage to the vehicles parked outside, leaving the home largely unharmed. Number 10. Brandon Climper and Savana King. A couple had just finished shoplifting from a Walmart in Woodland, California, in March of 2021 when their car stalled across the street from the store. According to authorities, 30-year-old Brandon Climper and 20-year-old Savana King were trying to make a quick getaway after walking out of the store with a cart full of unpaid merchandise. Employees saw the pair fleeing out an emergency exit and dialed 911. By the time the couple's car broke down, police were already on their way to the scene. In the meantime, an unsuspecting Good Samaritan helped Climper and King push the vehicle down the street. Police found the suspects sitting in the car with all the stolen items, which were returned to Walmart. The car was towed from the scene, and King received a shoplifting citation, while Climper was booked into custody on 2 outstanding warrants and a shoplifting charge. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 9. Janel Ambrosia. 36-year-old Narvel Benning was sitting in his vehicle outside a Dollar General store in Cheektowaga, New York, on his way to work one day in 2014 when a woman later identified as Janel Ambrosia targeted him in an explosive racist tirade. Ambrosia accused Benning of scaring her child with the sound of his vehicle's ignition and began hurling racial slurs at him. Instead of matching Ambrosia's anger, Benning began recording the incident on his cell phone. The father of 4 stayed remarkably calm while Ambrosia continued to raise her voice and repeatedly spewed racist remarks while approaching his vehicle. At one point, the enraged woman bragged about stripping for the police and called a man who she claimed was her boyfriend. During the conversation, she blamed Benning for her behavior. In a subsequent interview with local radio station WBLK, Ambrosia claimed that Benning had called her a crack-headed cracker before he began recording their interaction. She later recanted her claim and apologized for her behavior, this time blaming her actions on her mental issues. No charges were ever filed against Ambrosia, but the incident went viral and made national news, and it remains fresh in the minds of the greater Buffalo community to this day. Number 8. Brian Zuniga. 20-year-old Brian Zuniga was being chased by sheriff's deputies in Pinellas Park, Florida, shortly before 3 a.m. in May of 2013 when he decided to ditch his SUV and continue the pursuit on foot. He kicked a hole in a vinyl fence and went behind a water treatment plant where he encountered a large alligator who bit his face and arm. Unable to find Zuniga, deputies ended the chase and put out an alert to law enforcement to keep their eyes out for the suspect. Several hours later, they received a call from police in St. Petersburg, who had been called to a local hospital in response to a reported animal attack. Zuniga had gone to the emergency room for treatment to his injuries, prompting staff members to contact law enforcement. He told responding officers about the alligator attack, but left out any details about the fact that he was running from the police when it occurred. According to a police report, Zuniga claimed he was watching fish jumping in a pond when he fell in and came face to face with the reptile. Because the location of the attack was in another jurisdiction, the responding officers alerted the sheriff's department, at which point they realized that the patient was the man who escaped during a pursuit that morning. After being released from the hospital, Zuniga was booked into custody on charges of fleeing or eluding, breaking or injuring fences, driving with a suspended or revoked license, and resisting an officer without violence. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 7. James Washington. When 50-year-old James Washington thought he was about to die from a heart attack in 2009, he made a deathbed confession to the unsolved murder of a Nashville woman 14 years earlier. At the time, he was in a Tennessee jail on an unrelated case. As he took what he believed were some of his last breaths, he weakly motioned to a nearby guard and said that he had beaten 35-year-old Joyce Goodner to death back in 1995. Goodner died in a particularly gruesome fashion. By the time police found her body, she had been stabbed in the neck, beaten with a brick, and set on fire. Washington was always a suspect, but with little evidence and no DNA left behind by the culprit, the case quickly went cold. And it stayed that way until he confessed to committing the crime. Much to Washington's surprise, he survived his heart attack and his health improved. Perhaps not surprisingly, he tried to recant his confession to Goodner's murder, but prosecutors moved forward with a case against him. In 2012, he was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to at least 51 years in prison. Number 6. Jennifer Kaufman. In August of 2018, sheriff's deputies in Seminole County, Florida, spotted a stolen SUV that was being driven by 46-year-old Jamie Young. They tried to pull the driver over in Stamford, but were instead led on a high-speed chase into neighboring Brevard County. The pursuit ended when Young lost control of the SUV and crashed into a stop sign, causing the vehicle to land in a ditch. She and her passenger, Jennifer Kaufman, both fled the scene on foot. Young attempted to hide in some nearby bushes but was quickly captured by law enforcement. In the meantime, Kaufman ran into a cow pasture. An aerial surveillance team tracked her movements as a herd of around 20 cows began following her. In an audio recording, the helicopter pilot could be heard telling police to follow the cows and that it looked like the animals might attack the fleeing suspect. Luckily for Kaufman, she managed to make it across the pasture without being attacked, but she was less fortunate when it came to her attempts to evade law enforcement. After reaching the edge of the field and jumping over a fence, she hid in some bushes and was soon captured by deputies. Both she and Young were charged with drug possession, petty theft, resisting arrest, and trespassing. Number 5. Joseph McKinnon. In May of 2022, residents in Trenton, South Carolina, called the Edgefield County Sheriff's Office and reported seeing a man lying unconscious on the ground. Responding deputies arrived to find 60-year-old Joseph McKinnon dead in his yard near the partially buried body of his girlfriend, 65-year-old Patricia Dent, whose murdered remains were bound and wrapped in garbage bags. McKinnon had dug a hole and placed Dent's body inside, but before he could finish filling it, he died from a heart attack. Neighbors told investigators that they had seen McKinnon dig in the hole the previous day, and an autopsy found that Dent had been strangled to death. Based on the evidence, it was apparent that McKinnon was almost done filling Dent's grave when he set his shovel down and walked away. He then collapsed to the ground and never regained consciousness. The circumstances leading up to the murder remain unclear. Number 4. Cynthia Guy. As an addiction counselor based in Casper, Wyoming, Cynthia Guy was tasked with helping court-mandated clients get their lives on track. But she did the exact opposite in 2014 when she pressured a patient with suspected gang ties to find a hitman who was willing to kill her ex-husband, Terry Thomas. The intended victim was a successful businessman who had provided Guy with a comfortable existence after the couple married in 2004. But the marriage ultimately fell apart, and in 2014, Thomas divorced Guy. He was awarded the majority of their assets, despite Guy putting up a lengthy and relentless fight in her attempts at winning a larger settlement. The day after the divorce was finalized and her appeal was rejected, Guy approached her client with the hitman request. Guy's patient played along with the request but tipped off law enforcement to the plan, and an undercover agent was tasked with posing as a hitman. While the undercover hashed out the details of the murder-for-hire plot with Guy, police warned Thomas that his ex was trying to have him killed and placed him in protective custody. He bounced around between various hotels until Guy was arrested for solicitation of murder in a sting involving the undercover. Guy maintained her innocence during questioning, but she ultimately pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of solicitation to commit aggravated kidnapping in exchange for a 20 to 25-year prison sentence. Number 3. Ethan Thomas. Homeowner Irvin Armstrong was in the process of moving from San Antonio to Corpus Christi, Texas, in October of 2023, when the home surveillance system at his San Antonio residence alerted him to the presence of a man and a woman who had forced their way into the home through the back entrance. He called the police, and the male suspect, later identified by law enforcement as 33-year-old Ethan Thomas, tried to hide on some rafters in the attic while his female accomplice fled the scene. But the intruder slipped off his perch, fell 2 stories, and became hopelessly stuck between the chimney and the wall. Unable to escape on his own, Thomas was left with no choice but to seek rescue from the same people that he had been trying to avoid just moments earlier. Responding officers had to remove some of the siding in order to free Thomas, who was then booked into custody on suspicion of burglary and evading arrest. According to the most recent available updates, Thomas's case was ongoing and the female suspect remained at large. Speaking with local station Ken's 5, Armstrong said that in addition to the damages that were done to the residents for the sake of rescuing Thomas, the intruders trashed his house and stole some of his property, but instead of feeling angry, he chalked the incident up to karma and said that he was glad nobody was seriously injured. Today's topic was requested by Dick Templar and Nicholas Lanahan, 8942. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Michael Wayne Gowens. Michigan Judge Sean B. Perkins has a reputation for his no-nonsense approach to courtroom matters, but he's also willing to bend in the defendant's favor when he feels it's appropriate to do so. During a court hearing over video chat in 2024, he agreed to dismiss a case against a man named Michael Wayne Gowens. Apparently unaware that he was still logged into the chat room, Gowens uttered a remark calling Perkins a rude name. Perkins immediately demanded to know who had just made the uncalled-for remark. Realizing that his commentary had been overheard, Gowens initially tried to blame his distasteful wording on his phone malfunctioning, but the judge was unconvinced by the excuse and decided to hold him in contempt of court. Gowens initially rolled his eyes as he uttered an apology, but he became seemingly more sincere as Perkins kept him in the hot seat for several minutes, causing him to realize that he wasn't going to get off the hook for his behavior. At one point, Gowens practically pleaded with the judge to accept his apology. Gowens' lawyer tried to mitigate the circumstances for his client by explaining that the defendant was under a lot of stress at that time in his life. After deciding to hold the defendant in contempt, Perkins made him wait until he addressed all the other cases in that day's docket, which proved to be lengthy. Number 1. Racist Rambler receives a right hook on what began as an ordinary day on the London Underground in 2020. One ignorant strap hanger decided that the subway was an appropriate place for voicing his racist beliefs as he rambled half coherently on the train without a COVID mask, despite a requirement being in effect at the time. At least one witness began recording his behavior with their cell phone. In the footage, the raging passenger could be heard screaming at an onlooker out of the camera's view. He demanded to know the person's name before making a derogatory remark about their skin tone. And when the woman filming the video asked what the relevance of the person's skin color was, the man told her to shut up. He continued targeting innocent bystanders with his rage, including a group of black passengers who he referred to as pets. In what can perhaps best be described as a swift delivery of well-deserved karma, one of the group members turned around and punched the man in the face, causing him to immediately fly backward across the train car as he fell unconscious. One witness ran to the man's aid while a woman could be heard laughing and saying not to help a racist. While the outcome of the situation is unclear, it's probably safe to assume that the man learned a thing or two about acting racist in public. Thanks for watching. If you lost your bag on a plane with your entire savings of $100,000 cash in it and Jeff Bezos turned up the next day to return your bag, how much reward money would you give him? Let us know in the comment section below.